Have you ever walked into a room and realized that everything you thought you knew about your life was about to change forever? My name is Nathan Cole, and 3 years ago, I buried the woman I thought I would grow old with. Caroline was 34 when the cancer took her, leaving me alone with our 5-year-old daughter, Lily, and a heart so shattered I wasn't sure it would ever beat properly again. I am 41 years old now, the CEO of Cole Architecture, a firm I built from nothing into one of Chicago's most respected design companies. I have designed skyscrapers that touch the clouds, homes that have graced the covers of magazines, and public spaces that thousands of people walk through every day. Architecture was always my passion, my calling. Caroline used to say that I could see buildings in the air before they existed, that I could look at an empty lot and envision the life that would fill it someday. But after she died, I couldn't design anything. Every line I drew reminded me of the house I had built for us, the nursery I had crafted with my own hands for Lily, the garden I had landscaped because Caroline loved roses. Every blueprint became a reminder of plans we had made together, dreams we had shared, a future that would never come to pass. I met Caroline when we were both 25. She was an art history professor at Northwestern, brilliant and beautiful, with hair the color of honey and eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. I was a young architect, hungry and ambitious, working 80-hour weeks at a firm that didn't appreciate me. We met at a gallery opening in River North, both of us pretending to understand a particularly abstract piece of modern art. "I think it's supposed to represent the fragmentation of the modern psyche," she had said, tilting her head at the canvas. "I think the artist spilled paint and decided to call it intentional," I had replied. She had laughed, a sound like wind chimes on a summer evening, and I had known in that moment that I wanted to make her laugh for the rest of my life. We were married 2 years later, in a small ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Her father walked her down the aisle in a white dress that made her look like an angel descended from heaven. I remember standing at the altar, watching her approach, and thinking that I was the luckiest man in the world. I remember promising to love her in sickness and in health, never imagining that sickness would come so soon, or that health would be so fleeting. Lily arrived 3 years after that, a perfect pink bundle with her mother's eyes and my stubborn chin. I was there when she was born, holding Caroline's hand through 18 hours of labor, crying when the nurse placed our daughter in my arms for the first time. I had built a nursery for her in our home in Winnetka, a room painted in soft yellows and greens, with a crib that I had designed myself, curved and elegant, like a nest for the most precious bird in the world. Those were golden years. Caroline continued teaching, though she cut back her hours to spend more time with Lily. I started my own firm, pouring everything I had into making it successful. We were happy. We were so incredibly happy that sometimes I would lie awake at night, watching Caroline sleep, wondering what I had done to deserve such a beautiful life. The answer, it turned out, was nothing. Life doesn't give you what you deserve. Life gives you what it gives you, and you learn to survive it, or you don't. Caroline was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when Lily was 4 years old, stage 3. The doctor delivered the news in a sterile white office, his voice calm and professional, as if he wasn't telling us that our world was about to end. I remember Caroline's hand tightening around mine. I remember the way her breath caught in her throat. I remember thinking, absurdly, that the doctor's tie was crooked, and how could he deliver such devastating news with a crooked tie? We fought it. God, how we fought it. Caroline endured surgery, then chemotherapy, radiation. She lost her beautiful honey-colored hair. She lost weight until her collarbones jutted out like wings beneath her skin. But she never lost her smile, not even at the end. She smiled at Lily every single day, even when smiling took all the strength she had left. I was with her when she died. It was a Tuesday in March. The sky outside grey and heavy, with the promise of rain. Lily was at my mother's house, blissfully unaware that her world was about to shatter. Caroline's hand was cold in mine, her breathing shallow and ragged. The hospice nurse had told me it wouldn't be long. "Promise me something," Caroline had whispered, her voice barely audible. "Anything," I had said. "Promise me you'll be happy again. Promise me you'll find love again. Lily needs a mother, Nathan, and you need someone to love you. Don't spend the rest of your life mourning me. That's not what I want. That's not the life I fought so hard to give you. Caroline, I can't. Promise me. I had promised, because what else could I do? She was dying in my arms, and she was asking me for one last thing. And how could I refuse her anything? She died an hour later, just as the rain began to fall. I broke my promise almost immediately. For 3 years, I existed. I didn't live. I went through the motions of being a father, of being a CEO, of being a human being. But inside, there was nothing but an endless winter, a cold that had settled into my bones and refused to leave. I hired nannies to care for Lily, a rotating cast of competent strangers who came and went like seasons. I hired a housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, a stern woman in her 60s who kept the house running with military precision. I threw myself into work, arriving at the office before dawn and leaving long after the sun had set. People told me I needed to move on. My mother, my business partner, Marcus. Caroline's friends, who called less and less frequently as the months passed. They told me that grief has stages, that eventually I would reach acceptance, that life goes on. But life didn't feel like it was going on. Life felt like it had stopped the moment Caroline took her last breath, and I was just a ghost, haunting the spaces where we had been happy together. I couldn't sleep in our bedroom. The bed we had shared for 8 years felt like a tomb. I moved into one of the guest rooms, unable to face the emptiness of her side of the mattress, the silence where her breathing should have been. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her perfume bottles still lined the vanity. I couldn't bring myself to move them. Couldn't bring myself to acknowledge that she was truly gone. Lily suffered too, though I was too wrapped up in my own grief to see it clearly. She became quiet, withdrawn. She stopped asking questions about her mother. She stopped laughing. The nannies would give me reports. Lily had a good day today. She played with her dolls. Lily was sad today. She cried when she saw a picture of her mother. I listened to these reports like a man watching a movie about someone else's life. I didn't know how to help her. I didn't know how to help myself. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday in October, 3 years after Caroline's death, I came home early from work. I hadn't intended to leave the office before 7. That was my routine, my armor against the emptiness waiting for me at home. I would arrive at 6 in the morning, before anyone else, and I would stay until the building grew quiet again. It kept me busy. It kept me from thinking. But that Tuesday, my business partner Marcus had practically thrown me out. Marcus and I had been friends since college. We had started Cole Architecture together 15 years ago, working out of a cramped studio apartment, surviving on ramen noodles and dreams. He knew me better than almost anyone, which meant he also knew when I was falling apart. "You look like death, Nathan," he had said, standing in the doorway of my office, his dark eyes filled with concern. "When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? When's the last time you ate a proper meal? When's the last time you had dinner with your daughter, instead of just kissing her goodnight after she's already asleep?" I had opened my mouth to argue, but the truth was I couldn't remember. The days had blurred together into one long grey monotony. I couldn't remember the last time I had tasted food instead of just consuming it. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept without nightmares. I couldn't remember the last time Lily had looked at me with something other than worried resignation. "Go home," Marcus had insisted. "Spend time with Lily. Remember what it feels like to be a father, not just a provider. I'll handle things here. I've been handling things here for months. I can handle them for one more afternoon." There was something in his voice, a gentle reproach, that cut through the fog I had been living in. He was right. I had been absent, physically and emotionally, for far too long. Lily was growing up without me, and I was missing it, hiding in my office because it was easier than facing the wreckage of my life. So I had left. It was only 4 o'clock when I pulled my car into the driveway of our home in Winnetka, a beautiful suburb north of Chicago, where old money mixed with new, where tree-lined streets led to stately homes that whispered of stability and permanence. Our house was a Georgian colonial that I had renovated when Caroline and I had bought it 10 years ago. 6 bedrooms, a sprawling garden, a 3-car garage, and enough space to raise a family. When we had bought it, we had imagined filling it with children, with laughter, with life. Now it felt like a mausoleum, filled with ghosts and memories I couldn't escape. I noticed immediately that something was different. The front windows glowed with warm light, and I could hear music drifting from inside. Not the classical music that our housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, preferred. The somber symphonies that seemed appropriate for a house in mourning. This was something contemporary, something with a gentle rhythm that seemed to pulse with life. I could hear a woman's voice singing along, and beneath it, another sound that stopped me in my tracks. Lily's laughter. It was bright and clear, ringing through the house like bells. I couldn't remember the last time I had heard her laugh like that. For the past 3 years, her laughter had been muted, careful, as if she was afraid that being too happy would somehow be disrespectful to her mother's memory. As if joy was something that belonged to the past, not the present. I let myself in through the front door, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't quite explain. The foyer was warm and bright, filled with the scent of something delicious baking in the kitchen. I expected to find Mrs. Patterson and Lily there, having their afternoon snack. But the kitchen was empty, save for a tray of fresh-baked cookies cooling on the counter. The living room was empty. The study was empty. I followed the laughter up the stairs, my feet moving almost of their own accord. The sound was coming from the master bedroom, the room that Caroline and I had shared, the room I hadn't been able to enter in 3 years. The door was slightly open, and soft light spilled into the hallway, golden and warm. I approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt whatever was happening, and what I saw through the gap in the door stopped me in my tracks. My breath caught in my chest. For a moment I forgot how to breathe entirely. Lily was sitting on the floor of the bedroom, surrounded by photographs. Not just a few photographs, but dozens of them, maybe hundreds, spread out around her like a sea of memories. I recognized them immediately. These were the photos I had packed away in boxes after Caroline's funeral, unable to look at them without feeling my heart crack open all over again. Photos from our wedding day. Photos of Caroline pregnant with Lily, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Photos of Lily as a baby, as a toddler, always with Caroline smiling beside her. And kneeling beside Lily, carefully helping her organize the photos, was a woman I had never seen before. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional attractiveness. It wasn't the kind of beauty that hit you over the head, demanding attention. It was quieter than that, gentler. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves, a rich auburn that caught the light from the window and seemed to glow with an inner warmth. It fell in soft waves past her shoulders, partially obscuring her face as she bent over the photographs. She was wearing a simple cream-colored sweater and dark jeans, nothing remarkable. But there was something about the way she moved, graceful and unhurried, that made it impossible to look away. But it wasn't her beauty that made my breath catch in my chest. It wasn't her hair, or her posture, or the gentle curve of her smile. It was what she was doing. She was holding up a photograph of Caroline, one I recognized immediately. It was from our wedding day, taken just after we had been pronounced husband and wife. Caroline was laughing in the picture, her head thrown back, her veil billowing behind her in the wind. Her eyes were squeezed shut with joy, and you could see the absolute unrestrained happiness radiating from every inch of her face. It was one of my favorite photos of her, one I hadn't been able to look at in 3 years because it hurt too much to remember that she had ever been that happy, that alive. "She's so pretty, isn't she?" the woman was saying to Lily, her voice warm and gentle, like honey dripping into tea. "Look at how happy she looks. That's how your daddy made her feel, sweetheart. That's what love looks like when it's real, when it fills you up until there's no room for anything else." Lily was staring at the photograph with wide eyes, her small fingers hovering just above the image, as if afraid to touch it. "She looks like a princess," she whispered, "like from a fairy tale." "She does," the woman agreed. "A princess who found her prince. And you know what? I think you look just like her. You have her eyes, Lily. Those same beautiful eyes that can see right into people's hearts. And you have her smile, that same smile that makes everyone around you feel like everything is going to be okay. Every time you smile, sweetheart, a little piece of your mommy is right here with us. She lives on in you." Lily reached out and touched the photograph carefully, reverently, the way you might touch a sacred relic. "I miss her," she said, her voice so small it barely carried across the room. "I miss her so much. Sometimes I'm scared I'm going to forget what she looked like. Sometimes I try to remember her voice, and I can't, and that makes me so sad. I know you do, sweetheart, and that's okay. It's okay to miss her. It's okay to feel sad. Missing someone means you love them, and love is the most beautiful thing in the world, even when it hurts. But you know what else? It's also okay to feel happy. Your mommy would want you to be happy. She would want you to laugh and play and have adventures. She wouldn't want you to stop living just because she had to stop. But what if... Lily hesitated, her lower lip trembling. What if being happy means I'm forgetting her? What if I laugh too much and she thinks I don't love her anymore? The woman set down the photograph and turned to face Lily fully. She took my daughter's small hands in her own, and I could see the tears glistening in her eyes. Oh, sweetheart, your mommy knows how much you love her. She knows it every single day because she's watching you from heaven. She sees every beautiful thing you do. Every drawing you make, every song you sing, every time you help someone or share your toys. She's so proud of you, Lily. I just know it. And when you laugh, when you're happy, that makes her happy too. Because that's what mommies want more than anything else in the world. They want their children to be happy. Really? Lily asked, hope flickering in her eyes like a candle flame. Really, I promise. And you know what? That's why we're making this memory wall. So you can look at these pictures every day and remember her. So you can tell stories about her to your friends, to your family, to anyone who wants to listen. As long as we tell stories about the people we love, as long as we keep them in our hearts, they never really leave us. I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to move, unable to speak. Something was breaking open inside me, something that had been locked away behind walls of ice and grief for 3 long years. I felt tears burning in my eyes, tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed since the funeral. I had thought that crying made me weak, that holding myself together made me strong. But watching this woman, this stranger, comfort my daughter in a way I had been unable to do, I felt all my carefully constructed defenses begin to crumble. Who was this woman, and how had she found a way into my daughter's heart when I had been failing to reach her for so long? As if sensing my presence, the woman looked up suddenly. Our eyes met through the gap in the door, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Her eyes were green, the color of spring leaves just beginning to unfurl, flecked with gold like sunlight filtering through a forest canopy. They widened with surprise as she saw me standing there, then filled with something that might have been understanding, or compassion, or recognition of shared pain. "Mr. Cole," she said, rising quickly to her feet. "I didn't expect you home so early. Mrs. Patterson told me you usually don't return until after 7. I pushed the door open and stepped into the room. The scent hit me first, Caroline's perfume, still lingering in the air after all these years. I hadn't been in this room, couldn't bear to be in this room, but now I was here, surrounded by memories and photographs and a stranger who was teaching my daughter how to grieve in a way I had never been able to. Lily scrambled to her feet and ran to me, wrapping her arms around my legs with a force that nearly knocked me backward. "Daddy, you're home! Look what we're doing! We're making a memory wall for Mommy!" I looked down at my daughter, at her shining eyes, at the smile on her face, and then I looked at the photographs spread across the floor, at the large corkboard that had been propped against the wall, already covered with pictures of Caroline. My wife smiled back at me from a dozen different angles, a dozen different moments frozen in time. Our first date at the Art Institute, our honeymoon in Positano, the day we brought Lily home from the hospital, exhausted and terrified and deliriously happy. "A memory wall?" I managed to say, my voice coming out hoarse and strange. "Miss Sophie said it would help me remember Mommy better," Lily explained, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement. "She said that when someone we love goes to heaven, we can keep them close by looking at pictures and telling stories. So we're making a wall with all the best pictures, and I'm going to put it in my room. And every night before I go to sleep, I can say goodnight to Mommy and tell her about my day. Miss Sophie said Mommy would love that." I looked at the woman, Sophie, and she met my gaze steadily, though I could see a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. She was waiting for my reaction, I realized, waiting to see if I would be angry that she had unpacked my memories without permission, that she had entered my bedroom without asking, that she had presumed to know what my daughter needed better than I did. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice calm but careful. "I should have asked your permission first. Mrs. Patterson mentioned that Lily has been asking a lot of questions about her mother lately, and I thought this might be a good way to help her process her feelings. But I understand completely if you're upset. I can put everything back exactly as it was. I should have been upset. That was the logical response. This was my bedroom, filled with my memories, with photographs that I had packed away because looking at them hurt too much to bear. This was a stranger, someone I had never met, who had taken it upon herself to unpack my grief and spread it across the floor like a picnic blanket. I should have been furious, but I wasn't. Standing there, looking at Lily's glowing face, at the pictures of Caroline surrounding us like a loving embrace, at this woman who had somehow understood what my daughter needed when I had been too lost in my own pain to see it, I felt something shift inside me. The anger I expected never came. Instead, there was something else, something that felt dangerously close to gratitude. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. She extended her hand, professional and composed, despite the awkwardness of the situation. Her hand was warm and soft, and when she shook mine, her grip was firm but gentle. "Sophie Bennett," she said. "I'm Lily's new nanny. Mrs. Patterson hired me last week. I'm sorry. I assumed she had told you about me." Mrs. Patterson. I made a mental note to have a conversation with our housekeeper about making major household decisions without consulting me. But even as I thought it, I knew I couldn't really blame her. I had been so absent, so uninvolved in the day-to-day running of our home, that Mrs. Patterson had been forced to take matters into her own hands. I couldn't remember the last time I had asked about Lily's care, about who was looking after her, about what she needed. I had been a ghost in my own house, and now a stranger knew my daughter better than I did. "She may have mentioned it," I admitted, shame coloring my words. "I've been distracted." Sophie nodded, her expression softening with understanding rather than judgment. "I understand," she said simply. "Mrs. Patterson explained your situation. I want you to know that I'm not trying to overstep. Lily and I have just been getting to know each other this week, and when she told me about her mother, about how much she missed her, I wanted to help. I lost my own mother when I was young, so I know how important it is to keep those memories alive. I know what happens when you don't." There was something in her voice, a depth of empathy that went beyond mere professional compassion. She wasn't just saying words she thought I wanted to hear. She understood what Lily was going through because she had lived it herself, had walked the same dark path of loss and grief, and learning to survive. "How old were you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "When you lost her?" 8, she said simply. "Old enough to remember her, young enough that the memories have faded more than I wish they had. I remember the way she smelled, like lavender and vanilla. I remember the songs she used to sing when she tucked me in at night. But I can't remember the sound of her voice, not clearly, not the way I want to, and that's the hardest part, isn't it? When the details start to slip away and you're left holding on to shadows." Her eyes were bright, with unshed tears, and I found myself nodding, because she had just articulated something I had felt, but never been able to put into words. That was my greatest fear, that Lily would forget Caroline. Not just the facts of her, the color of her hair and the shape of her smile, but the essence of her, the warmth of her presence, the way she had of making everyone around her feel loved and safe. "That's why I started this project with Lily," Sophie continued. "I don't want her to forget. Caroline deserves to be remembered. She was clearly an amazing woman, and Lily should grow up knowing that. She should be able to look at these pictures every day and remember that her mother loved her more than anything in the world." She said my wife's name with such reverence, such respect, that something shifted in my chest. This woman had never met Caroline, but she was treating her memory as something precious, something worthy of protection. She wasn't trying to replace her or erase her. She was trying to keep her alive in the only way that mattered. "Daddy, are you sad?" Lily asked, tugging on my hand. I looked down at her worried little face, and I realized that she was seeing my tears. I hadn't even noticed I was crying. The tears were rolling down my cheeks, warm and wet, the first tears I had shed in 3 years. "No, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down to her level so our eyes could meet. "I'm not sad. I'm just surprised. This is a beautiful thing you're doing for Mommy. The most beautiful thing." Lily's face lit up like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. "Do you want to help? Miss Sophie says you probably have lots of stories about Mommy that I don't know. She says that sharing stories is how we keep people alive in our hearts. That's what she told me, Daddy. She said as long as we tell stories about Mommy, Mommy will never really be gone." I looked up at Sophie, at this stranger who had somehow, in just 1 week, done more to help my daughter heal than I had managed in 3 years. She met my eyes, and in that moment, something passed between us. Not romantic, not yet, but a recognition, an understanding, a shared knowledge of what it means to lose someone you love and have to find a way to keep living. "I would love to help," I said, and I meant it more than I had meant anything in a very long time. That afternoon changed everything. We spent hours on the floor of the master bedroom, the 3 of us, surrounded by photographs and memories. I told Lily stories I had never told her before, stories about how I had met her mother, about our first date, about the way Caroline had cried when she found out she was pregnant, happy tears streaming down her face as she showed me the positive test. Sophie listened quietly, adding photographs to the corkboard, asking gentle questions that drew out more memories, more details. By the time the sun began to set, painting the room in shades of gold and amber, the memory wall was complete. It hung against the wall, a tapestry of Caroline's life, of our life together. Lily stood in front of it, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Mommy would love it." "She would," I agreed. "She really would." Sophie began gathering up the empty boxes and scattered supplies, preparing to put the room back in order. I watched her work, efficient and graceful, and felt something stirring in my chest that I couldn't quite identify. "Thank you," I said suddenly, the words coming out before I could stop them. She looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For this." I gestured at the memory wall, at Lily, at the room that no longer felt like a tomb. "For helping her. For helping us." "I didn't know how to do this, Sophie. I didn't know how to help her grieve, how to help her remember. I was so lost in my own pain that I couldn't see hers. And you." I trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "I just did what I wish someone had done for me," she said softly. "When my mother died, no one talked about her. It was like she had never existed. My father couldn't bear to mention her name. My siblings were too young to remember. And I was left alone with all these memories, all these feelings, with no one to share them with. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I would help someone else the way I wished someone had helped me. "You're good at it," I said, "at helping." She smiled, and for the first time I noticed the dimple in her left cheek. "I try to be." That night, after Sophie had gone home and Lily was asleep, I walked through the house like a man waking from a dream. Everything looked different somehow. The shadows didn't seem quite so dark. The silence didn't seem quite so oppressive. I found myself in the master bedroom again, standing in front of the memory wall, looking at Caroline's face. "I promised you I would be happy again," I whispered to her photograph. "I haven't done a very good job of keeping that promise, have I? But maybe it's not too late. Maybe I can learn." For the first time in 3 years, I slept in the master bedroom. I climbed into the bed that Caroline and I had shared, pulled her pillow close to my chest, and breathed in the faint scent of her perfume that still lingered on the fabric. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't dream of her death. I dreamed of her life. Over the next few weeks, I found myself coming home earlier and earlier. At first, I told myself it was because I wanted to spend more time with Lily, to be the father I had been failing to be for so long. And that was true. But it was also true that I found myself looking forward to seeing Sophie. She was everything I wasn't. Where I was closed off and distant, she was warm and open. Where I had built walls around my heart so high that even I couldn't see over them, she seemed to have no walls at all. She laughed easily, cried easily, felt everything with an intensity that both confused and fascinated me. She was like a window thrown open after years of living in a sealed room, letting in fresh air and sunlight and the sounds of life that I had forgotten existed. She had a way of bringing life back into our house. She would play music while she and Lily baked cookies in the kitchen, teaching my daughter to measure ingredients and crack eggs and lick the spoon when I wasn't looking. She would dance with Lily in the living room, both of them spinning and laughing until they collapsed onto the couch in a heap of giggles. She would read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, making Lily squeal with delight at her impression of the big bad wolf. And she talked about Caroline, not in the hushed, reverent tones that everyone else used, as if my wife's name was too sacred to speak aloud. Sophie talked about Caroline like she was still a part of our lives, like she was just in another room and might walk in at any moment. She wove my wife's memory into our daily conversations so naturally that Lily began to do the same. "Your mom loved daisies, right?" she would say to Lily as they worked in the garden, planting bulbs for spring. "Let's plant some for her. She'll love seeing them from heaven." Or, "Sitting at the piano while Lily practiced her scales. I bet your mom was a great dancer. You're such a natural. You must have inherited it from her." Or, hanging a new drawing on the refrigerator. "What do you think your mom would say about this drawing?" "I think she would say it's the most beautiful butterfly she's ever seen." For the first time in 3 years, my daughter could talk about her mother without her eyes filling with tears. For the first time, the memory of Caroline brought her joy instead of pain. I would watch them together, Lily chattering away about something that had happened at school while Sophie listened with genuine interest, and I would feel the ice around my heart beginning to crack. And me. I began to remember too. I began to pull out old photo albums that I had hidden away in closets, to look at our wedding video that I hadn't been able to face since the funeral, to visit the places that Caroline and I had loved. The bench at the Art Institute where I had proposed, the restaurant in Little Italy where we had celebrated our anniversaries, the spot on Oak Street Beach where we had told Lily she was going to be a big sister, before we realized that the pregnancy would be the only one we would ever have. The winter inside me was beginning to thaw, and as terrifying as that was, I couldn't seem to stop it. I didn't want to stop it. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than grief. I felt hope. I remember the night I first realized that my feelings for Sophie had crossed a line. It was a Thursday evening, about 6 weeks after she had started working for us. Lily was already in bed, worn out from a day of playing in the autumn leaves that had carpeted the backyard. I had come downstairs to find Sophie sitting in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book, a cup of tea cooling on the end table beside her. She looked up when I entered, and she smiled. It was a small smile, nothing remarkable, just a slight upturn of her lips and a crinkle at the corners of her eyes. But it hit me like a punch to the chest, stealing my breath and making my heart stutter in a way it hadn't in years. "Lily went down without a fight tonight," she said, setting her book aside. "I think all the playing in the garden today tired her out. She was asleep before I finished the first chapter of Charlotte's Web." "Thank you," I said, settling into the armchair across from her, "for everything you do for her. She's happier than I've seen her in years. She's starting to seem like herself again." Sophie's smile softened. "She's an amazing little girl. It's not hard to love her." There it was, that word. Love. She said it so easily, so freely, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. And I realized, with a jolt of terror that felt like lightning striking my spine, that I was beginning to feel things for this woman that I had no right to feel. I was 41 years old. I was a widower. I had a daughter who depended on me, and I was falling for my nanny. It was such a cliché that it was almost laughable. The rich widower and the beautiful nanny, straight out of a romance novel or a cheesy made-for-TV movie. If Marcus had told me this story about someone else, I would have rolled my eyes and accused him of making it up. And yet, there I was, living it. I tried to talk myself out of it. I made lists of all the reasons why it was impossible, why it was inappropriate, why she could never feel the same way. She was my employee. She was 10 years younger than me. She had only known me for 6 weeks, and for most of that time, I had been a barely functioning shell of a human being. What could she possibly see in a broken-down widower with a mountain of grief, and a daughter who needed more than he knew how to give? But the heart doesn't listen to reason. It doesn't care about logic or propriety or the sensible thing to do. It wants what it wants, and mine, it seemed, wanted Sophie. "Mr. Cole, can I ask you something?" Sophie said, breaking into my spiraling thoughts. "Nathan," I corrected automatically. "Please, Mr. Cole is my father. And he was a stern man who believed that emotions were a sign of weakness. I'm trying very hard not to be him." And she smiled again, and I felt that same punch to the chest. "Nathan, then, can I ask you something personal?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "When was the last time you laughed, really laughed, the way Lily does when we play together? Not a polite chuckle or a half-hearted smile, but a real, from-the-belly laugh that makes your eyes water and your stomach hurt." The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it again. I searched my memory, trying to find an example, a moment when I had felt that kind of unrestrained joy. But I couldn't. I genuinely could not remember the last time I had laughed with abandon. "That long, huh?" she said gently. "I suppose so." She closed her book and set it aside, her green eyes holding mine with an intensity that made it hard to look away. "Caroline would want you to laugh again, you know. She would want you to be happy. I never met her, but everything I've heard about her, everything Lily has told me, everything I've seen in those photographs, tells me that she was a woman who loved life, who loved you. And I can't imagine that she would want you to spend the rest of your life like this, Nathan, existing instead of living, going through the motions instead of feeling something." I felt a flash of irrational anger, hot and bright. How could she know what Caroline would want? She had never met her. She had never seen the way Caroline's face lit up when she laughed, had never felt the warmth of her hand in the darkness, had never heard her voice whispering, "I love you," in the moments before sleep. But even as the anger flared, it died. Because she was right. Of course, Caroline would want me to be happy. That was the last thing she had asked of me, her dying wish, the promise I had made and broken 1,000 times over. She had loved me. She would never have wanted me to spend the rest of my life in this grey half-existence, trapped in a tomb of my own making. "I know," I admitted, the words tasting like ashes in my mouth. "But knowing it and doing it are two different things. I've tried, Sophie. I've tried to move on, to be happy, to feel something other than this. Emptiness. But every time I get close, I feel like I'm betraying her. Like being happy means I'm forgetting her, like moving on means she didn't matter." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost tender. "I felt that way after my mom died. For years I felt like I had to carry my grief around like a stone, because letting it go would mean letting her go. Every time I laughed, every time I felt happy, I would immediately feel guilty, like I was dishonoring her memory. It took me a long time to understand that grief and joy aren't opposites. They can exist together. You can miss someone and still laugh. You can remember them with love and still look forward to the future. Healing isn't betrayal, Nathan. It's survival. It's what the people we love would want for us." I stared at her, this woman who had walked into my life and turned everything upside down. She understood. She really, truly understood, in a way that no one else had been able to. Not my mother, who told me to snap out of it and move forward. Not Marcus, who offered practical solutions to an emotional problem. Not the therapist I had seen for 3 months before giving up. Sophie understood because she had lived it, had felt the same crushing weight, had found her way out of the darkness. "Maybe you just need someone to help you remember how," she said. "How to laugh. How to feel. How to live. Like I'm helping Lily." I looked at her, at this woman who had walked into my life and changed everything, and I felt the walls around my heart begin to crack. "Maybe I do," I said. The moments between us began to shift after that night. There were glances that lingered too long, accidental touches that sent electricity through my veins, conversations that stretched late into the evening after Lily was asleep. I found excuses to be in the same room as Sophie, to hear her voice, to watch the way her hands moved when she talked. expressive and graceful. I learned everything I could about her. Sophie was 32 years old, born and raised in a small town in Wisconsin called Ephraim on the shores of Door County. She had grown up in a house by the lake, the oldest of 4 children, helping her mother care for her younger siblings from the time she could walk. She had studied early childhood development in college, intending to become a teacher, but after her father died during her senior year, a sudden heart attack that no one had seen coming, she had taken a year off to care for her family. By the time she was ready to go back, life had moved on, and she had found herself drawn to nannying instead. "I like the one-on-one connection," she explained one evening as we sat on the back porch, watching the stars come out. It was early November, and the air had turned crisp and cold, but neither of us wanted to go inside. "In a classroom, you have 20 kids all needing your attention. You can't give any of them what they really need because you're spread too thin. With nannying, I can really focus on one child, really help them grow and thrive. I can be there for the big moments and the small ones. I can make a difference." "You've definitely made a difference for Lily," I said. "She talks about you constantly. Miss Sophie says this, Miss Sophie does that. I think you might be her favorite person in the world." Sophie turned to look at me, and in the dim light of the porch lamp, her eyes seemed to glow. "She's become so important to me, Nathan. I want you to know that. Whatever happens, whatever you decide about my employment here, Lily will always matter to me. She's not just a job. She's family." There was something in her voice, a vulnerability that I hadn't heard before. It occurred to me then that she was just as uncertain about what was happening between us as I was. She felt it too, this thing growing between us, this connection that had nothing to do with employer and employee and everything to do with 2 people recognizing something in each other, something rare and precious. "What do you mean, whatever happens?" I asked carefully. She looked away, back at the stars. Her profile was sharp against the night sky, the curve of her nose, the fullness of her lips. "I just mean, I know this is complicated. I'm your employee, there are boundaries, and you're still grieving your wife. I would never want to do anything to disrespect Caroline's memory or to make you uncomfortable. So if you ever feel like I'm overstepping, please tell me. I'll back off, I promise." I thought about her words for a long moment. She was right that it was complicated. Everything about this situation was complicated. The power dynamics of employer and employee, the ghost of Caroline that still lingered in every room of this house, the fact that I had 2 people depending on me, Lily and now Sophie, and I couldn't afford to make mistakes. But for the first time in 3 years, complicated felt preferable to empty. Messy felt better than numb. "You're not overstepping," I said quietly. "You're the only person who hasn't walked on eggshells around me since Caroline died. Everyone else treats me like I'm made of glass, like one wrong word will shatter me. They whisper about me when they think I can't hear. Poor Nathan, he's never been the same. Has he seen anyone? A therapist? A grief counselor? Someone should do something. But no one does anything. No one talks to me like I'm still a person, except you. You talk to me like I'm Nathan Cole, a man, not the widower, or poor Lily's father. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" She turned back to me, and I saw tears glistening in her eyes. "I know what it's like," she said. "When my mom died, people treated me like I was made of glass, too. They were so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they stopped saying anything at all. They avoided me in the hallways. They changed the subject whenever I tried to talk about her. It was the loneliest time of my life. I had all this grief inside me, and nowhere to put it, no one to share it with. So I decided that if I ever met someone going through the same thing, I wouldn't be like them. I would show up, I would talk. I would let them know they weren't alone." Without thinking, I reached out and took her hand. It was the first time I had touched her intentionally, not an accidental brush of fingers or a professional handshake, but a deliberate connection. Her hand was warm in mine, soft and strong at the same time, and the contact sent a shiver through both of us. "I'm sorry," I said, "for your loss and for that loneliness. You didn't deserve that." She squeezed my hand gently. "I'm sorry for yours, too. You didn't deserve it either." We sat there in the darkness, holding hands, saying nothing, and in that silence, something new began to grow. Not love, not yet, but the seeds of it, planted in the fertile soil of shared understanding and mutual pain. But happiness, I had learned, rarely comes without complications. And mine arrived in the form of my mother-in-law. Eleanor Whitmore had never liked me. Even when Caroline was alive, even when I had done everything in my power to make her daughter happy, Eleanor had looked at me with barely concealed disdain. I wasn't good enough, in her eyes. I came from a middle-class family, not old money like the Whitmores. I worked with my hands, designing buildings instead of managing investments like her late husband had done. I didn't belong in her world, and she had never let me forget it. She tolerated me when Caroline was alive, for her daughter's sake. Caroline adored her mother, despite Eleanor's flaws, and I loved Caroline too much to create conflict between them. But after Caroline died, whatever thin veneer of civility had existed between us crumbled away. Eleanor blamed me. She never said it outright, but I could see it in her eyes every time she looked at me. She blamed me for not noticing the symptoms sooner, for not insisting on more aggressive treatment, for not somehow preventing her daughter from dying. It was irrational, I knew. I had done everything I could. I had begged and pleaded with doctors, had researched experimental treatments, had held Caroline's hand through every surgery and every round of chemotherapy. But Eleanor needed someone to blame, and I was the easiest target. She arrived unannounced on a Saturday afternoon, exactly 2 months after Sophie had started working for us. I was in my study, catching up on work emails, when Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway with an expression that could only be described as long-suffering. "Mrs. Whitmore is here to see you, sir," she said, her tone carefully neutral. I felt my stomach drop. Eleanor never called ahead. She simply appeared like a bad omen, expecting the world to rearrange itself around her. Did she say what she wants? To see her granddaughter, I believe. Of course. Eleanor made these surprise visits every few months, always with the stated purpose of seeing Lily, but inevitably ending in some kind of confrontation with me. She would criticize the way I was raising her granddaughter, the school I had chosen, the food she was eating, the clothes she was wearing. Nothing I did was ever good enough. I steeled myself and headed to the living room. Eleanor was already there, sitting ramrod straight on the edge of the couch, her back not touching the cushions. She was a handsome woman in her mid-60s, with silver hair perfectly coiffed and expensive clothes that spoke of old money and good taste. Caroline had inherited her mother's bone structure, but none of her coldness. Where Eleanor was sharp edges and disapproval, Caroline had been warmth and softness. "Eleanor," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "this is a surprise." "Nathan." She nodded curtly, not bothering to stand or offer any greeting warmer than my name. "I was in the area and thought I would stop by. Where is Lily?" "In the garden with her nanny." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "Nanny? Since when do you have a nanny? What happened to Mrs. Patterson?" "Mrs. Patterson is still here. She manages the household. But with her getting older and Lily needing more active supervision, we hired a nanny to help with childcare." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "And you didn't think to consult me about this decision? About who would be caring for my granddaughter?" I felt my jaw tighten. "Lily is my daughter, Eleanor. I don't need your permission to hire household staff." "She is my granddaughter," Eleanor shot back. "My daughter's child, the only part of Caroline I have left. I have a right to know who is caring for her." Before I could respond, the back door burst open, and Lily came running in, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Leaves tangled in her hair. She looked wild and happy, more alive than I had seen her in years. Daddy, you have to come see! Miss Sophie found a praying mantis, and she says they're good luck. And we made a little house for it in a jar with leaves and sticks, and—" She stopped abruptly when she saw Eleanor. "Grandma, Eleanor!" She ran to hug her grandmother, and for a moment Eleanor's face softened. Whatever her feelings about me, she did love Lily, in her own way. That was the one thing we had in common, the one foundation on which we could build a fragile truce. "Hello, darling," Eleanor said, wrapping her arms around Lily. "What's all this about a praying mantis?" "Miss Sophie found it. Come meet her, Grandma. She's the best." She knows everything about bugs and flowers, and she makes the best chocolate chip cookies ever, even better than Mrs. Patterson's. But don't tell Mrs. Patterson I said that." Sophie appeared in the doorway then, slightly out of breath, a jar with the praying mantis in her hands. She stopped when she saw Eleanor, her smile faltering for just a moment before she recovered. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company. Lily, sweetheart, let's give your dad and your grandmother some privacy." "Nonsense," Eleanor said, her eyes narrowing as she took in Sophie's appearance. The windswept hair, the dirt on her jeans, the easy familiarity with which Lily clung to her hand. "Come in, let me see this praying mantis my granddaughter is so excited about." Sophie hesitated, looking at me for guidance. I nodded slightly, and she stepped into the room. "Mrs. Whitmore, I presume. It's nice to meet you. I'm Sophie Bennett, Lily's nanny." Eleanor studied her the way a hawk studies its prey, her gaze travelling from Sophie's face to her clothes to the jar in her hands, and back again. "Miss Bennett, I've heard nothing about you until just now. How long have you been working here?" "About 2 months, Mom." "And what are your qualifications?" Sophie's smile remained in place, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she straightened her spine. "I have a degree in early childhood development from the University of Wisconsin, and over 10 years of experience working with children as both a nanny and a tutor. I'd be happy to provide you with references if you'd like." "I would like," Eleanor said coolly. "You'll understand, I'm sure, that my granddaughter's safety is of the utmost importance to me." "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. I completely understand." Sophie set the praying mantis jar on the coffee table and crouched down to Lily's level. "Sweetheart, why don't you stay here and visit with your grandmother while I go get some lemonade for everyone? Would you like that?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Can you bring the cookies too, the ones we made this morning?" "Absolutely." Sophie straightened and headed for the kitchen, and I couldn't help but notice the way Eleanor's eyes followed her, cold and calculating. The visit only deteriorated from there. Eleanor interrogated me about Sophie's background, about why I hadn't consulted her before making such a significant change to Lily's care, about whether it was appropriate to have a young, attractive woman living under the same roof as a widower. "Living under the same roof?" I repeated, my patience finally snapping. "Sophie has her own apartment. She works here during the day and goes home at night. There's nothing inappropriate about it." "That's not what it looked like when I walked in," Eleanor said acidly. "Lily talks about her as if she hung the moon. Miss Sophie this, Miss Sophie that. And the way you look at her, Nathan, don't think I didn't notice." I felt heat rising to my face. "I don't know what you're implying, but I'm implying that my daughter has been dead for 3 years and you've already found her replacement." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My vision went white at the edges, and I felt a roaring in my ears, like standing too close to a waterfall. "Caroline is irreplaceable," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "No one could ever replace her. Not Sophie, not anyone. She was the love of my life. She gave me Lily. She made me who I am, and you think I could just forget her? Erase her? Replace her with the first woman who walks through the door? You think that little of me?" Eleanor's eyes widened slightly, surprised by my intensity. I was usually so careful around her, so controlled. I had learned early in my marriage that arguing with Eleanor was pointless. She would always win, if only by wearing you down with sheer stubbornness. But I couldn't let this go, not this. "I am allowed to move on with my life, Eleanor. I am allowed to be happy again. That's what Caroline would have wanted. That was the last thing she asked of me the night she died. She made me promise that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life mourning her, that I would find love again, that I would give Lily a mother. Are you going to stand there and tell me I should break my promise to your dying daughter?" Eleanor's face went pale. She asked you that?" "She did. Her last words to me were about happiness, about moving forward, about living. So don't you dare stand in my house and accuse me of betraying her when all I'm trying to do is keep the promise I made." We were both standing now, facing each other across the coffee table, our voices rising. Neither of us noticed Sophie standing in the doorway, a tray of lemonade in her hands, until she spoke. "Excuse me." Her voice was quiet, but firm. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I think this conversation might be better had in private." She set the tray down and turned to me. "Nathan, I'm going to take Lily upstairs for a bit. She doesn't need to hear this." She was right, of course. In my anger, I had forgotten that Lily was still in the room, sitting on the couch, her eyes wide and frightened. She was watching her father and grandmother fight, and I could see the old fear in her eyes. The fear of things falling apart, of people she loved hurting each other. "Go with Miss Sophie, sweetheart," I said, forcing my voice to calm. "Daddy and Grandma just need to talk about some grown-up things." "It's okay." Lily looked between us uncertainly, then slid off the couch and took Sophie's hand. As they left the room, I heard Lily whisper, "Are Daddy and Grandma fighting because of you?" Sophie's reply was too quiet for me to hear, but I saw her squeeze Lily's hand reassuringly as they headed up the stairs. Eleanor watched them go, then turned back to me. "That woman has bewitched you both." "That woman," I said, emphasizing each word, "has done more to help Lily heal from her mother's death than anyone else, including you or me. Do you have any idea how much progress she's made in the past 2 months? She talks about Caroline now, Eleanor, freely, happily. She laughs, she smiles, she started playing again, making friends, being a normal child. When was the last time you saw her truly happy before Sophie came? Can you even remember?" Eleanor's face contorted with something that might have been pain. For the first time, I saw the woman behind the armor, the grieving mother who had lost her only child. "I see my daughter in that child," she said, her voice cracking. "Every time I look at Lily, I see Caroline. Her eyes, her smile, her mannerisms, and I see you replacing her mother with a stranger. How am I supposed to feel about that? How am I supposed to watch you bring another woman into my daughter's home, into my daughter's life, and not feel like her memory is being erased?" For the first time, I felt a flash of sympathy for Eleanor. She had lost her only daughter. She was terrified of losing her only grandchild too, of seeing Caroline's memory fade and disappear. Her anger wasn't really about Sophie, it was about fear, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing the last connection she had to the daughter she loved. "No one is replacing Caroline," I said more gently. "Lily needs someone to help her remember her mother, to keep those memories alive. That's what Sophie does. She's not trying to be Caroline. She's trying to make sure Caroline is never forgotten. She made a memory wall with Lily, did you know that? A wall covered with photographs of Caroline, of our family, of all the happy times we had together. Lily looks at it every night before she goes to bed. She tells her mother about her day. Sophie taught her to do that." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, the anger replaced by something more fragile. "I want to believe you, Nathan, but I'm scared. I'm so scared of losing Lily too." "You won't," I said. "Lily loves you. Nothing is going to change that, but you have to trust me. I love my daughter more than anything in this world. I would never do anything to hurt her. I would never let anyone hurt her, including myself." Eleanor looked at me, really looked at me, and some of the hostility drained from her face. I saw a tired woman, a woman weighted down by grief and fear, a woman who had built walls around her heart, just like I had. "I'll be watching," she said finally. "If I see any sign that this woman is harming my granddaughter in any way—" "You won't," I said firmly, "because she isn't." Eleanor left shortly after that, and I went upstairs to find Sophie and Lily. They were in Lily's room, sitting on the bed together, looking at a picture book. Lily's eyes were still a little red from crying. "Is Grandma Eleanor gone?" she asked when she saw me. "She's gone, sweetheart. I'm sorry if she scared you." "She doesn't like Miss Sophie," Lily said, her lower lip trembling. "She said Miss Sophie was trying to replace Mommy. But that's not true, is it, Daddy? Miss Sophie would never do that. She loves Mommy too, even though she never met her. She told me so." I looked at Sophie, who met my eyes with an expression that made my heart ache. There was fear there, fear that she had caused problems, that she had come between me and Caroline's family, that she had damaged something that couldn't be repaired. But there was also something else, something that looked almost like hope. "No, sweetheart," I said, sitting down on the bed beside them. "Miss Sophie is not trying to replace Mommy. No one could ever replace Mommy. She's trying to help us remember Mommy, to keep her close to our hearts even though she can't be here with us anymore. And she's doing a wonderful job. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Lily threw her arms around Sophie, hugging her tightly. "I love you, Miss Sophie." Sophie's eyes filled with tears and she hugged Lily back. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. So very, very much. I watched them together, this woman who had walked into our lives and changed everything, and my daughter who was finally beginning to heal. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that I was falling in love with Sophie Bennett. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The answer came to me on a cold evening in late November. Lily had been invited to a sleepover at her best friend Emma's house. And after much deliberation, I had agreed to let her go. It was her first sleepover since Caroline's death, a major milestone that Sophie had helped me prepare for. She had talked me through my fears, had helped Lily pack her overnight bag, had reassured both of us that everything would be fine. She needs this, Nathan, Sophie had said as we watched Lily skip down the walkway to Emma's front door, her pink backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She needs to be a normal kid, doing normal kid things. And you need to trust that she's going to be okay. What if something happens? What if she has a nightmare and I'm not there? Then Mrs. Henderson will comfort her, and you'll pick her up in the morning and give her the biggest hug in the world. But Nathan, she's going to be fine. She's stronger than you think. You both are. With Lily gone, the house felt emptier than usual, quieter. The silence that had once been suffocating now felt simply lonely. I found myself wandering from room to room, unsure what to do with myself, picking up objects and putting them down again, checking my phone every few minutes even though I knew Emma's mother would call if there was a problem. I ended up in the kitchen, where Sophie was cleaning up after the dinner she had made before taking Lily to the sleepover. Roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, Lily's favorite, a special send-off for her big adventure. You could have gone home early, I said, leaning against the counter. There's nothing for you to do with Lily away. She looked up from the sink and smiled. I know, but I wanted to make sure you were okay. Big night, letting your little girl spread her wings. Is it that obvious that I'm not okay? You've been pacing like a caged lion for the past hour. I thought you were going to wear a hole in the floorboards. I laughed, surprising myself. It was a real laugh, not the polite chuckles I had been offering the world for 3 years, but something genuine and warm. I'm that transparent, huh? Only to someone who knows what to look for. She dried her hands on a dish towel and turned to face me. She's going to be fine, Nathan. Mrs. Henderson is lovely, and Lily has been friends with Emma since preschool. This is good for her. It's good for both of you. I know, it's just... I trailed off, unsure how to articulate the fear that had been building in my chest all day. The fear that something would happen while I wasn't watching. The fear that the universe would take someone else from me the moment I let my guard down. You're afraid something will happen to her, Sophie said gently, like something happened to Caroline, and you won't be there to protect her. I stared at her. How do you do that? How do you always know exactly what I'm feeling, even when I don't know it myself? She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something soft and floral that made me think of spring gardens and new beginnings. Because I felt it too. After my mom died, I was terrified of losing anyone else. Every time my dad left the house, I was convinced he was never coming back. Every time my little sister got sick, I was sure it was something serious. I spent years waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the universe to prove that happiness was just a setup for more pain. Does it ever go away completely, that fear? No, she admitted, but it gets smaller, manageable. You learn to live with it instead of letting it control you. You learn that love is worth the risk, even when the risk feels unbearable. We were standing very close now, close enough that I could count the freckles scattered across her nose, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, close enough that reaching out and touching her felt like the most natural thing in the world. Sophie, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something. She looked up at me, her eyes searching my face. What is it? I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head. Lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, I had planned exactly what I would say, how I would explain my feelings in a way that was careful and measured and didn't scare her away. I had written speeches and discarded them, had practiced in front of mirrors, had agonized over every word. But standing there, looking into her eyes, all my careful words deserted me. There was only the truth, raw and unpolished. "I'm falling in love with you," I said. "I've been trying not to. God knows I've been trying. I've been telling myself all the reasons why it's impossible, why it's inappropriate, why you could never feel the same way. You're my employee. You're younger than me. You deserve someone who isn't broken, someone who doesn't come with a mountain of grief, and a daughter who needs more than I know how to give." But I can't stop. Every day I fall a little more. Every time you smile, every time you laugh, every time you look at me like you understand exactly who I am, I fall deeper. And I need to know if there's any chance at all, that you might feel the same. She was silent for a long moment, so long that I felt my heart begin to sink. I had ruined everything. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, had said words that couldn't be unsaid. She would leave, and I would be alone again, and Lily would lose the one person who had truly helped her heal. And then she reached up and touched my face, her fingers soft against my cheek, tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that made my breath catch. "Nathan Cole," she said, and there were tears in her eyes. "I've been falling in love with you since the first moment I saw you standing in that bedroom doorway, crying over photographs of your wife. You didn't see me as a nanny or an employee or a stranger. You saw me as a person. And every day since then, you've shown me who you really are underneath all that grief. A kind man, a devoted father, a man who loves so deeply that losing that love nearly destroyed him, someone worth knowing, someone worth loving." "Sophie! I know this is complicated," she continued, cutting me off. "I know there will be people who judge us, who think it's too soon or too inappropriate. I know your mother-in-law will probably never accept me. And I know that being with me will come with challenges and difficulties and moments when you wonder if you made the right choice. But I don't care about any of that. What I care about is you, and Lily, and building something real with both of you, something that honors Caroline's memory instead of erasing it." I kissed her then, unable to hold back any longer. It was soft at first, tentative, as if we were both afraid that the other would pull away. Her lips were warm and tasted faintly of the wine we had had with dinner. My hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and her arms wrapped around my neck. The kiss deepened, became something more, something that felt like coming home after a long journey through darkness, something that felt like the first warm day after an endless winter. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, our foreheads pressed together, our hearts beating in sync. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We take it slow," I said. "We figure this out one day at a time. We make sure Lily is okay with everything before we move forward. She's been through so much already. I won't do anything that might hurt her." "Agreed." She smiled, that same smile that had been making my heart skip beats for weeks. "But for the record, I think Lily is going to be thrilled. She's been dropping hints about wanting me to stay forever since our second week together." I laughed again, and this time it felt easier, more natural. "Is that so? She asked me last week if I would marry her daddy so I could be her new mommy. She said she'd been praying for it every night, asking God to send someone to make you smile again. I told her that wasn't up to me, that it was something you would have to decide, but I didn't say no. I pulled her close again, holding her against my chest, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. "Thank you," I murmured into her hair. "For what?" "For walking into my life, for helping my daughter, for not giving up on me even when I was too broken to see what was right in front of me, for being patient, for being kind, for being you." She tilted her head back to look at me. "You were never broken, Nathan, just grieving, and grief takes time. It takes as long as it takes. There's no schedule, no timeline, no right way to do it. You've been doing the best you can, and that's all anyone can ask." I'm starting to believe that. We spent the rest of the evening together, talking and laughing and getting to know each other in ways we hadn't before. I told her about my childhood, about growing up in a small house in Oak Park with parents who loved each other fiercely and fought just as fiercely. I told her about discovering architecture, about the moment I first understood that buildings could be more than structures, that they could be art, that they could change the way people lived and felt and dreamed. She told me about her mother, about the songs she used to sing and the stories she used to tell. She told me about caring for her siblings after her father died, about putting her own dreams on hold to make sure they were okay. She told me about the loneliness of those years, the feeling of being invisible, of being the one who held everyone together while falling apart inside. We discovered that we both loved old movies and terrible puns and long walks on rainy days. We discovered that we both hated cilantro and small talk and people who didn't use their turn signals. We discovered that we had both been pretending to be okay for so long that we had almost forgotten what okay actually felt like. When it got late, she finally stood to leave. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Big day tomorrow. Lily will have a lot to tell us about her sleepover." I walked her to the door, our fingers intertwined. At the threshold, we kissed again, softly, a promise of things to come. "Good night, Nathan," she said. "Good night, Sophie. Dream of me." She laughed, a sound that made my heart feel full to bursting. I always do. The next few months were the happiest I had known since Caroline's death. Sophie and I took things slowly, as we had promised. We didn't rush into anything, didn't let our feelings sweep us away before we were ready. We went on dates, real dates, dinner at quiet restaurants and walks along the lakefront and trips to the Art Institute where we would make up ridiculous stories about the paintings to make each other laugh. We told Lily first, and just as Sophie had predicted, she was overjoyed. We sat her down on the couch, Sophie and I on either side of her, and I explained that Miss Sophie and I had decided to be more than friends. "Does this mean Miss Sophie can live with us forever?" she asked, bouncing on the cushions with excitement. "Does this mean she's going to be my new mommy?" "Not yet, sweetheart, but maybe someday, if that's what we all want. Would you like that?" "More than anything in the whole wide world," she threw her arms around Sophie, nearly knocking her over. "I've been praying for this. I asked God to send Daddy someone to love, and he sent you." Sophie hugged her back, tears streaming down her face. "And I'm so grateful he did. I love you, Lily. I love you and your daddy so much." We told Marcus next, and he reacted exactly as I expected, with a grin and a knowing look that said he had seen this coming months ago. "About time," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "I was starting to worry you'd never figure it out. She's good for you, Nathan. Anyone can see that. You're like a different person when she's around. You actually smile now. I'd forgotten what your smile looked like." We told my mother, who cried happy tears and immediately started planning a dinner party to welcome Sophie to the family. We told Sophie's siblings, who drove up from Wisconsin to meet me and subjected me to a rigorous interrogation that I apparently passed, judging by the hugs I received at the end of the evening. And then we told Eleanor. That was significantly harder. We invited her to dinner at the house, Sophie and I cooking together in the kitchen, while Lily set the table with her best effort at formality. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, because she was never late for anything, and she accepted a glass of wine with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The meal was tense. Eleanor made small talk with Lily, asked about school and friends and piano lessons. But her eyes kept darting to Sophie and me, watching the way we moved around each other, the unconscious touches and shared glances of people in love. Finally, over dessert, I took Sophie's hand and told Eleanor what she had already guessed. "Sophie and I are together," I said. "We're in love. I wanted you to hear it from us directly." Eleanor set down her fork. Her face was unreadable. "And what about my daughter?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. "What about Caroline?" "I will love Caroline until the day I die," I said. "Nothing will ever change that. She was my first love, the mother of my child, the woman who made me who I am. But she's gone, Eleanor. And she asked me before she died to find happiness again, to find love again. I'm honoring her wishes. I'm keeping my promise." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. I could see the struggle on her face, the war between her grief and her grudging acknowledgement that I was right. "Sophie," she said finally, turning to look at the woman beside me, "I haven't been kind to you. I've treated you with suspicion and hostility from the moment we met. I want to apologize for that." Sophie's eyes widened in surprise. "Mrs. Whitmore, you don't have to—" "Let me finish." Eleanor held up her hand. I was afraid of losing Lily, afraid of Caroline being forgotten, afraid of being replaced, of becoming irrelevant. I took that fear out on you, and that wasn't fair. She paused, her voice softening. Lily talks about you constantly. She talks about the memory wall you made, the stories you tell her about her mother, the way you've helped her remember Caroline. That's not the behavior of someone trying to erase my daughter's memory. That's the behavior of someone trying to preserve it. Caroline was an amazing woman, Sophie said quietly. I wish I had known her. But I feel like I do. Through Lily, through Nathan, through all the photographs and stories and memories you've all shared with me. I would never try to replace her. I just want to be another person who loves Lily, who helps her grow up to be as wonderful as her mother was. Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. Take care of them, she said, the same words she would repeat at our wedding a year later. Take care of my granddaughter, that's all I ask. I will, Sophie promised, always. Spring came, and with it new beginnings. Sophie moved into the house officially, not into the guest room where I had been sleeping, but into the master bedroom with me. The first night she was there, I held her hand as we walked through the door together. The room had been transformed. We had redecorated it together, choosing new bedding and curtains, new artwork for the walls. We kept Caroline's memory wall, which now hung in the hallway where Lily could see it every day, but the bedroom itself was ours. A new chapter. Are you okay? Sophie asked, squeezing my hand. I'm more than okay, I said. I'm home. That night, I slept better than I had in years. And for the first time since Caroline's death, I didn't dream of the past. I dreamed of the future. Summer arrived, hot and humid and glorious. Lily finished second grade with straight A's and a report card full of praise from her teachers. We celebrated with a trip to Disney World, the three of us, a family vacation that Caroline and I had always planned, but never taken. It was Lily's first time, and watching her face light up as we walked through the gates was worth every minute of the endless lines and the oppressive heat. She wanted to meet every princess, ride every ride, eat every sugary treat the park had to offer. Sophie and I took turns carrying her when she got tired, bought her Mickey ears that she refused to take off even when we got back to the hotel, and took approximately 10,000 photographs that I would treasure forever. This is the best day ever, Lily declared as we watched the fireworks over Cinderella's castle. She was perched on my shoulders, her arms wrapped around my head, the Mickey ears slightly askew. Mommy would have loved this, wouldn't she, Daddy? She would have loved it, I agreed. She's watching right now, sweetheart, I'm sure of it. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Daddy, I think Mommy sent Miss Sophie to us. I think she's watching from heaven, and she saw how sad we were, and she asked God to send us someone to make us happy again. I felt tears prick my eyes. I looked at Sophie, who was standing beside me, her face illuminated by the fireworks, tears streaming down her cheeks. I think you might be right, sweetheart, I said. I think Mommy sent her to us too. In Lily's 8th birthday, I proposed to Sophie. We had been planning the party for weeks, Lily and I, keeping it a secret from Sophie. It was a butterfly theme, in honor of the caterpillar Sophie had found in the garden that first day, the caterpillar that had turned into a beautiful monarch butterfly and flown away to start its new life. There were butterfly decorations everywhere, butterfly-shaped cookies, even a cake with edible butterflies perched on top. When the party was over and the guests had gone home, I led Sophie out to the garden. The sun was setting, casting everything in shades of gold and amber, and the fireflies were just starting to emerge. Tiny sparks of light dancing in the gathering dusk. Nathan, what's going on? Sophie asked, laughing as I pulled her along the garden path. Where are we going? Right here, I said, stopping in front of the rose bushes that Caroline had planted years ago. They were in full bloom, their scent filling the air, a reminder of the woman who had loved them and the life we had shared. I got down on one knee. Sophie's hands flew to her mouth. Nathan. Sophie Bennett, I said, pulling the ring box from my pocket. You walked into my life when I was at my lowest. You found me drowning in grief and you threw me a lifeline. You helped my daughter heal from a wound I didn't know how to touch. You helped me heal from a wound I didn't think could ever close. You brought light back into this house when I thought it would be dark forever. You taught me how to laugh again, how to hope again, how to love again. I opened the box, revealing the ring inside. A simple diamond solitaire, elegant and timeless, surrounded by smaller stones that sparkled like fireflies. I love you with everything I am, Sophie. Every broken piece, every healed scar, every part of me that's still learning how to be whole again. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much. Will you marry me? She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her cheeks, her whole body trembling with emotion. Yes, she said. Yes, Nathan. Yes, 1,000 times yes. I slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and swept her into my arms. Behind us I heard a squeal of delight, and we turned to see Lily and Mrs. Patterson watching from the back porch, both of them crying too. She said yes, Lily shrieked, jumping up and down. Miss Sophie said yes. She's going to be my new mommy. Sophie laughed and held out her arms, and Lily came running. I wrapped both of them in a hug, my two girls, my family. I love you both so much, Sophie said, her voice muffled against my chest. We love you too, I said. More than you'll ever know. Over Sophie's head, I looked up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. Thank you, Caroline, I thought. Thank you for watching over us. Thank you for sending her to us. Thank you for giving me the courage to keep my promise. Somewhere, I could almost swear I heard her laugh, bright and clear and free. We were married the following spring, in a small ceremony in our garden, surrounded by family and friends and the roses that Caroline had planted. Lily was the flower girl, scattering rose petals down the aisle with the utmost solemnity. Sophie's sister was her maid of honor, and Marcus stood beside me as my best man. Eleanor came, and though she wasn't exactly warm, she was civil. She complimented Sophie's dress, kissed Lily's cheek, and shook my hand with something that almost resembled acceptance. She even gave Sophie a stiff hug after the ceremony. Take care of them, she said quietly, so only Sophie could hear. I will, Sophie promised, always. That night, after the guests had gone home and Lily was asleep, Sophie and I stood on the back porch, looking up at the stars. Do you remember the first time I saw you, I asked, in the bedroom with all those photographs? Of course, you looked like you'd seen a ghost. In a way, I had. But not a scary one. An angel, my angel. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I knew, even then. I knew you were someone special. I knew this house, this family was where I was meant to be. How could you know? I was such a mess. I was barely functioning. Because of the way you looked at Lily, the way you looked at Caroline's pictures. A man who loves that deeply, who grieves that completely, is a man worth knowing, worth loving. I saw your pain, Nathan, but I also saw your heart. And I knew, even then, that it was a heart worth waiting for. I kissed the top of her head. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she agreed, and I could hear the smile in her voice. But you're stuck with me now. I wouldn't have it any other way. We stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the crickets chirping and the distant hoot of an owl. And I thought about how strange life was, how it could bring you to your knees with grief, and then, just when you thought you would never get up again, lift you higher than you ever imagined. I had lost the love of my life. I had spent 3 years drowning in grief, convinced that I would never surface, never breathe again. And then Sophie had walked through my door, and everything had changed. She hadn't replaced Caroline. No one could ever replace Caroline. But she had shown me that my heart was bigger than I thought, that it had room for more than one love, more than one kind of happiness. Caroline would always be a part of me, a part of Lily, a presence in our lives that would never fade. But Sophie was here now, warm and alive and loving us with everything she had. I thought about that moment when I had first seen her in the bedroom, kneeling beside Lily, surrounded by photographs. I thought about how she had looked up at me, her green eyes meeting mine through the gap in the door. I thought about the words she had been saying to my daughter. That's what love looks like. She had been talking about Caroline, but she had also been talking about the future, about a love that hadn't happened yet, about a family that was still waiting to be formed. I pulled Sophie closer, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, the steady rhythm of her breathing. "I love you, Sophie Cole," I said. She looked up at me, her eyes shining in the starlight. "I love you too, Nathan, forever." Forever. It was a big word, one I had been afraid to use since Caroline died. But standing there with Sophie in my arms, our daughter sleeping peacefully inside, I finally understood what it meant. Forever wasn't about how long you had together. It was about how completely you loved each other in the time you were given. I had loved Caroline with everything I had. I would always love her. But I loved Sophie too, in a different way, a new way. And I would spend the rest of my life showing her what that love meant. The winter inside me was gone. In its place was something warm and bright and full of promise. A future I had never dared to imagine. A happiness I had never expected to find. And it had all started with a simple question. A question I would never forget. Have you ever walked into a room and realized that everything you thought you knew about your life was about to change forever? I had, and I was grateful for it every single day. 5 years have passed since that October day when I came home early and found Sophie in the master bedroom, surrounded by photographs of my late wife, teaching my daughter how to remember. Lily is 13 now, all legs and attitude, and the same stubborn streak that Caroline had. She's in 7th grade, obsessed with horses and K-pop, and a boy named Tyler, who Sophie assures me is completely harmless, Nathan. Please stop glaring at him every time he comes to pick her up for the movies. She's on the honor roll, captain of the debate team, and volunteers at the local animal shelter every Saturday. She looks more like Caroline every day. Sometimes I'll catch a glimpse of her profile, or hear her laugh a certain way, and my breath will catch in my chest because for just a moment, I see her mother looking back at me. But there's Sophie in her too now, in the way she talks with her hands, in the songs she hums while doing her homework, in the fierce protectiveness she shows toward her younger siblings. Yes, siblings. 2 years after we got married, Sophie gave birth to twins. A boy and a girl, born on a snowy January morning that had me white-knuckling the steering wheel all the way to the hospital. We named them James, after my father, and Rose, after the flowers Caroline had loved so much. They're 3 now, whirlwinds of energy and curiosity and ear-splitting volume. James has my eyes and Sophie's smile, while Rose has Sophie's auburn hair and, improbably, Caroline's nose. The family resemblance that shouldn't be possible, but somehow is. Lily is over the moon about being a big sister. She takes her responsibilities very seriously, helping with feeding and bath time and bedtime stories. She teaches James about dinosaurs and Rose about butterflies. She tells them both about the mother she lost, about the grandmother they never met, making sure that Caroline remains a part of our family, even as it grows and changes. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and everyone is asleep, I walk through the hallways and marvel at how full they've become. Toys scattered across the living room floor, drawings taped to the refrigerator. Shoes of all sizes piled by the front door. This house that once felt like a mausoleum now bursts with life, with laughter, with love. The memory wall still hangs in the hallway, though it's grown considerably over the years. We've added photographs of Sophie, of our wedding, of the twins as newborns and toddlers. We've added pictures of family vacations, of birthday parties, of ordinary Tuesday afternoons that somehow feel worth commemorating. Caroline is still there, at the center of it all, smiling out from a dozen different moments. But she's surrounded now by the life that continued after her, the family that grew from the seeds she planted. Eleanor visits regularly, and while she and Sophie will never be best friends, they've reached a kind of understanding. Eleanor dotes on all 3 grandchildren equally, spoiling them with expensive gifts and strict etiquette lessons and stories about Caroline that make Lily laugh, and the twins stare in wide-eyed wonder. She even smiled at Sophie during last year's Christmas dinner, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, and I knew then that the ice between them had finally thawed. I still miss Caroline. I will always miss her. There are moments, unexpected and sharp, when grief catches me off guard. A song on the radio that we used to dance to, a smell that reminds me of her perfume, a phrase that Lily uses that sounds exactly like something her mother would say. In those moments, The loss feels as fresh as it did on that grey March day when she took her last breath. But grief and joy aren't opposites. Sophie taught me that. They can exist together, intertwined, two threads in the same tapestry. I can miss Caroline and still be happy. I can honor her memory and still embrace my present. I can love the woman I lost and the woman I found, and neither love diminishes the other. That's what love looks like, I've learned. Not a finite resource that has to be divided and rationed, but something infinite that grows the more you give it away. Last week, I took Lily to visit Caroline's grave. We go every few months, just the two of us, to lay flowers and talk to her mother and remember the woman who gave Lily life. It's not sad anymore, or at least not only sad, it's peaceful. A chance to honor the past while celebrating the present. "Mom?" Lily said, kneeling beside the headstone. "I got an A on my science project, the one about ecosystems. I know you would have helped me make it better because you were smart about stuff like that, but Sophie helped me, and she's pretty good too. And Dad only tried to take over like 3 times, which for him is practically a miracle." She glanced up at me with a grin, and I rolled my eyes. "I also wanted to tell you about the twins," she continued. "James is obsessed with trucks right now, like every truck. Garbage trucks, fire trucks, ice cream trucks, he knows the names of all of them. And Rose is learning to read. She's only 3, but she can already read like 20 words. Sophie says she's going to be a bookworm, just like you were." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "I miss you, Mom. I still think about you every day. I look at the memory wall before bed just like you and Sophie and I used to do when I was little. I tell you about my day. I show you my drawings, even though they're not really drawings anymore, they're more like sketches. I'm pretty good, actually. Dad says I got my artistic side from you." She reached out and touched the headstone, her fingers tracing the letters of Caroline's name. "I also wanted to tell you that I'm happy. Really happy. I have Dad and Sophie and James and Rose and Grandma Eleanor and Uncle Marcus and Aunt Jenny, and so many people who love me. I know you sent Sophie to us, Mom. I know you were watching from heaven and you saw how sad we were, and you asked God to help us, so thank you. Thank you for loving us enough to let us be happy without you." She stood up, brushing grass from her knees, and took my hand. "Ready to go, Dad?" "In a minute," I said. I knelt beside the headstone, placing my hand where Lily's had been. "Hey, Caroline," I said softly. "It's me, Nathan, your husband, the love of your life, remember?" I smiled, even as tears pricked my eyes. I kept my promise. It took a while, but I kept it. I found happiness again. I found love again. I'm giving Lily the life you wanted for her, full of laughter and adventure and people who adore her. I'm being the father you always knew I could be." I paused, swallowing past the lump in my throat. "I want you to know that I'll never forget you. Not a single day goes by that I don't think of you, that I don't feel your absence like a missing limb. You were my first love, Caroline, my great love, and part of my heart will always belong to you, no matter how much time passes or how much my life changes." I glanced back at Lily, who was waiting patiently by the car, giving me privacy. "But I also want you to know that I'm okay. That we're okay. Sophie takes care of us, just like you asked. She loves Lily like her own. She loves me in a way I never expected to be loved again. She keeps your memory alive, not just as a photograph on a wall, but as a presence in our daily lives, in the stories we tell and the values we teach and the love we share." I pressed my hand flat against the cold stone. "Thank you for the years we had. Thank you for Lily. Thank you for teaching me what it means to love someone so completely that losing them nearly destroys you. And thank you for giving me permission to survive, to thrive, to live." I stood up, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "I love you, Caroline. I always will, until we meet again." I walked back to the car, where Lily was waiting. She didn't say anything, just took my hand and squeezed. We drove home in comfortable silence, the radio playing softly, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the road. When we got home, Sophie was in the kitchen, Rose on her hip, James playing with trucks at her feet. She looked up when we came in, her eyes soft with understanding. "How was it?" she asked. "Good," I said, kissing her forehead. "It was good." She smiled, that same smile that had captured my heart all those years ago in a bedroom full of photographs. "Dinner's almost ready. Lily, can you set the table? James, time to put the trucks away." The evening unfolded the way our evenings always do, noisy and chaotic and filled with love. We ate dinner together, all 5 of us crowded around the table, passing dishes and interrupting each other and laughing at James's knock-knock jokes that didn't make any sense. We gave the twins their bath, Sophie and I working as a team, covering ourselves in soap bubbles and giggling children. We read bedtime stories and sang lullabies and made sure everyone had their favorite stuffed animal within arm's reach. And then, finally, the house was quiet. Sophie and I sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars come out. Her head was on my shoulder, her hand in mine, the same position we had been in on that November night years ago when I first told her I loved her. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything," I said. "Nothing. How lucky I am. How strange life is. How I never expected any of this." "Expected what?" "This." I gestured at the house behind us, at the life inside it. Happiness, family, a second chance I didn't think I deserved. She tilted her head to look at me. "You deserved it, Nathan. You always deserved it. You just had to learn to believe that." "You taught me that. We taught each other." I kissed her, soft and slow, the way I kissed her every night. The way I would kiss her for the rest of our lives. "I love you, Sophie Cole. I love you too, Nathan Cole, forever and always. Forever and always." The words Caroline and I had said to each other on our wedding day. The words Sophie and I had adopted as our own, a bridge between past and present. Between the love I had lost and the love I had found. I thought about that October afternoon, the day I came home early from work and found a stranger in my bedroom, surrounded by photographs of my late wife. I thought about the fear I had felt, the confusion, the overwhelming sense that something was changing, and I didn't know if I could handle it. I couldn't have known then what that moment would lead to. I couldn't have known that the woman kneeling beside my daughter would become the love of my life, the mother of my children, the partner I would build a future with. I couldn't have known that the worst moment of my life would eventually give way to the best, that grief and joy could exist together, that the heart that had been shattered could not only heal but expand to hold more love than I had ever thought possible. But that's what happened. Against all odds, against every fear and doubt and dark night of the soul, that's what happened. I found love again. I found happiness again. I found a family. And it all started with a question I will never forget. A question I now ask everyone I meet who is struggling with loss, with grief, with the overwhelming weight of life. Have you ever walked into a room and realized that everything you thought you knew about your life was about to change forever? Because here's the truth. That moment is coming for all of us. The moment when everything shifts. The moment when the darkness gives way to light. The moment when we find the person, or the purpose, or the possibility that transforms us from survivors into thrivers. You just have to be open to it. You just have to be willing to walk through the door, even when you're scared, even when you can't see what's on the other side. I walked through that door, and on the other side, I found Sophie. I found joy. I found life. And I found that love. Real love, the kind that endures through loss and change and the passage of time, isn't something that happens once. It isn't a finite resource that gets used up and can never be replenished. Love is infinite. Love is renewable. Love is waiting for all of us, if we just have the courage to reach out and take it. That's what I found in the bedroom that October day. That's what I found in Sophie's smile, in Lily's laughter, in the tiny hands of my twins reaching up for me. That's what love looks like. And that's the story I wanted to tell you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And if you're out there, struggling with your own grief, your own loss, your own endless winter, I want you to know, spring is coming. The sun will rise again. And love, real love, the kind that heals and transforms and makes everything worthwhile, is closer than you think. You just have to be willing to let it in.